Hello, I'm Glenn W. Hunter, and with me today is Shor Denny and Joyce Clarke, and we are TIPS IE, Trauma-Informed Prevention Services of the Inland Empire. Today, we're going to talk about collateral trauma. I mean, it seems like we just threw some buzzwords together, but no, this is a lot deeper than that. What's going on, what's being driven by the pandemic, what's happening with our youth, with our families, and most importantly, our communities. So without further ado, Ms. Joyce, we're going to give you the first question. When we talk about collateral trauma, how do we even define financial difficulties for families in this crazy environment we're in right now?
Goodness, the pandemic or COVID has put us, or these households, in financial peril. Just can't get a foothold. Families are moving back home so that they could do some consolidating because people have lost their jobs, and we know that retail is down at least 80%, and maybe 20% of them, just throwing out a number, 20% of them have gone into bankruptcy. The politicians, the Democrats and Republicans, are using the wage earner as pawns. Pawns. Just give us some money, some financial relief, and that second wave, the HEROES Act that the Democrats asked for. And COVID has also made essential workers fearful, stressfully fearful to go home. So many of them wind up staying in hotels away from their family. School kids, you no longer have an option as to whether or not mom or dad is going to stay home with the school kids. So families are making stress decisions. That's the collateral trauma. Your family is now part of your stress. Schools are closed. Kids are home learning. So the stress decision is, what do we do? Who's taking care of our kids while they're home? And my last one is the gig worker, the person who drove Uber or Lyft, or even threw newspapers in front of your door. Well, Assembly Bill 5 had said after a certain amount of hours working, you have to become an employee. Well, Lyft and Uber challenged that, and they were about to leave California.
Wow.
That means how many people who have a second job, everybody in Hollywood, who was a waiter while they did auditions, was a gig worker while they did auditions. Well, guess what? They're not even doing auditions. So your gig work was paying the rent. Your gig work was putting food on the table. That is collateral trauma because the world is still on lockdown. So there you got it.
So now that we have the a good framework describing it, how does it affect the individual? Sure, specifically, the trauma that results from it, how is that manifesting in how people interact in their community and in their families?
It's going to be in a lot of different ways, right? But the first thing that's coming to my mind is rage, hopelessness. The fact that everything I worked for is gone. I think this is devastating in bringing upon depression and anxiety within our families, and not just with one member, but with all of them. So you have a whole household that are mentally stressed and challenged, that are overwhelmed. So I think it's huge. And I think that we're seeing a lot of people in community that are dealing with this type of stress. And something else I think that needs to go in there is this death toll. Even though we're not seeing the funerals, I mean, we've talked about this. I spoke with a person today whose mother and grandfather died of it, and they're trying to, how do they get back to work, and how do they deal with the kids, and how do they, with all of this all happening at one time. So, there's so much on each of us right now that you're really going to have to look at the self-care and self-maintenance. And I'm going to be truthful and say it's not going to be enough. We are all in states of depression right now. We're
Yes.
all in states of anxiety right now. And this is human. So what we're going to have to do is learn how to cope, because we're not going to not have it. We're not going to slip through and, you know, come out unscathed. We're all getting it. And this is community trauma, community symptoms, and community causes, right? And like you're saying, community or collateral trauma is what it all comes to, because it's all like a cesspool of horribleness, and none of us can get out of it. We're all literally in it together too. So it's not like you can go to your neighbor and ask for help, or, you know, what is going on, because they're suffering and dealing with it just as we are. No outlet whatsoever.
Absolutely.
I think
And
one of the things that I find is particular to the Inland Empire, not exclusively, but we're a good representation of it, is the fact that this community trauma, as it starts going inward into our households, it's going into multi-generational households. You know, so not only is, you know, the parents kind of concerned, the kids are trying to figure out what school's like, you know, there's a grandparent that may be involved in the household as well, who's being, seeing their reality disrupted. How is that managed when you have multiple generations with multiple needs, all sort of covering individually, trying to just figure out how are we going to cope with what happens today, because yesterday was pretty bad.
You know, that's why you're seeing all of this stuff going on in the news, the shootings, the fighting, the, you know, the domestic violence is up. That's why we're seeing all of this, because we don't have outlets, and it comes out in violence. It comes out in aggression. You know, a lot of things, I even look at some of this vigilante stuff that's going on, and I attribute some of that to simply, I don't know, we need to call this like pandemic, what's a word when everybody goes crazy, you know?
Mania.
Yeah, pandemic mania, because this is something that is literally impacting us all. And I can sit here and truly say, even as a mental health worker, that I cannot guarantee you that if I'm out there in the street and somebody did something just the right time in the right way, that I won't go off. I cannot even promise that, as someone who knows that I need to breathe and, you know, all of the things I know I need to do. And that's why this is such an unreal time, because even the experts, even the people that know, we're all struggling.
Yes.
We are looking at something, I believe, and I'm not going to say like I've been pondering on this forever and I've come up to this big thing, but I really think that this was meant to be. If we really start looking at where our society was before this pandemic, and what this pandemic has had us do, it's had us step back. It's had us reflect on this instant gratification world that we're in prior to COVID, right? I mean, it's made us stop and realize that there's meaning in our eyes, that when we speak to someone, if we look at them, that we'll actually be able to have a conversation without seeing our mouths, right? We're learning to go back to what a human is, you know, to seeing that we are vulnerable, that we do have weaknesses, as every human does. But before this, I used to say, and I believe that we all thought we were computers or God, right? Because nothing, you know, you couldn't show any weakness. You couldn't show anybody, oh my goodness, don't let your neighbor know that you might, you know, be struggling with this or with that, or that maybe your kid got an F. You know, appearance was everything. Oh, so now we're being real. We are all messed up, and we can all start from here. It's a great time to learn about our mental health, and a great time to learn how to try to maintain it and help others maintain it.
When you look,
I find it interesting, Shor, that you brought a great social emotional lens to the trauma that's coming on across people and across generations and across communities. But Joyce, if I may, I'd like to lean on your perspective and your expertise as we look at it from a more macroeconomic perspective. You know, what are the figures telling us that is accelerating the trauma that we just finished articulating?
Right. And Shor, the more Shor talked, about this trauma and this pandemic mania, I kept thinking about the low wage earner who lives paycheck to paycheck or almost paycheck to paycheck. And the Brookings Institute, who just did a survey this July and August, looking at the peril of households. The economic peril is so huge that it's unbelievable how long they think it's going to take us to get out of this. Because the low wage earner is also compounding his financial challenges with health challenges that were already existing. This is something that the survey uncovered. So it's facing families that, Shor just talked about, a mom and a grandparent who died at the same time. Well, these people who have these underlying health issues, they're exacerbated. And the Brookings Institute, when they did this survey, they did it major cities who usually are the model to what happens in between: New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, and Houston. And when these jobs were lost, the low wage earner was so anxious to get this unemployment and this extra $600 that went away, that now they've got another layer of stress because the eviction moratorium has gone away as well.
And they are raging. Fair housing says they're evicting people right and left.
Yes. Now, and look at the flip side of the coin. All the colleges, said you pay your tuition and your dorm fees before you get there, and you don't get any money back. So what the dorm management said, the third-party vendors who manage these dorms said, find some other student to live there. And you're saying, the campus is closed, we're online, who am I going to find? Well, lawyers started stepping forward saying, we will help you sue dorm management for unforeseen circumstances. You can't re-rent this dorm when the entire university is closed down. So eviction has taken on a whole color by itself and just hit every sector. Again, collateral trauma, pandemic mania. Every time you get knocked down to your knees, you think, okay, I'm flexible, I can do this. Here comes something else. And
the fires.
Well, thank you. That's where I was going. Let's look at the natural disasters that are promised every year. This is the time for California to burn like a furnace. And this is the worst they've seen in decades. From Southern California to Northern California to neighboring Oregon and to Washington. My girlfriend called me from Vegas. She said, Joyce, we can smell the smoke. In certain areas, when we go out, we can, right? Because Nevada's flat, desert. There are not all these trees to capture some of this smoke and fire. This is just beyond comprehension. This is biblical, what's going on now.
Yes, I was driving, literally I was in San Diego when both fires started. I was driving home looking at the San Diego fire and turned to come home and saw the El Dorado fire. So they both happened at the same time.
Right.
And driving after that, I had to go back down to San Diego and the whole distance was under smoke. We did not see the sky. This is stuff that, Oregon, my stepdaughter lives in Oregon and Portland. They went to Colorado because they couldn't breathe. Just add that to the fact that you've been unemployed, right? Like you said, I'm unemployed. I'm trying to figure out where to live. And now where I went to live, we're getting evacuated. It's like there's just one thing on top of the other thing on top of the other thing. It's so hard for us to regroup and to, try to even cope. When my main thing is cope, giving you coping skills and coping ways. And as I said earlier, there's just so much that we can do before our bodies literally kick in and our fight and flight Start.
Where are the resources? Generally, the American Red Cross or FEMA or someone is coming to our rescue. Well, guess what? Those people are in dire straits as well. They have financial situations. They have health issues. A friend of mine is a FEMA worker, and he was called back during this time, but he was dealing with his own health issues. He could not go on the front line. Poll workers cannot go on the front line because of health issues. But I am getting back to those who bear the brunt of all of this, our people of color, our low-wage earners, no matter what color they are. The resources just are fewer in those communities. And I want to thank Hollywood and people of means like Tyler Perry and some other actors who have come forward and done everything they can in their communities to be not only a resource, but to also be there for them. I've got your back.
No, I think it's important that those resources are being applied really to the least of us in that regard. So there is that sense of humanity that is integrating at this time. I think the alternative, though, is as we look at government and their strap, their inability to intercede with proper support. And I bring up this particular disparity because what kind of decisions, what kind of trade-offs are our government entities making that are continuing to fall short? I mean, yes, they have issues with tax revenue, but where are they really falling short in serving the people that they're entrusted with serving?
For California, I just remember reading about the property taxes because there was a hue and cry and petition, no property taxes, give the homeowners some relief. And the eye-opener back from the property tax department was, that's where the majority of our general fund comes from. If we stop that, we may as well pick up California and go somewhere else because it'll have no revenue. We'll be a welfare state. The other thing was gas tax. That funds the general fund. Mm-hmm. And where the government falls short is that they can only go so deep into debt as they look at ways and solutions of how they're going to recoup this when you're not working, I'm not working, Shor's not working, our household's not working. Our college students aren't even getting an education, a credible education to be potential wage earners in the next year or so. So the government's hands are tied, local government and state government, their hands are tied because why? They're stuck to a budget. The resources that California has, somebody asked me this, how come California was able to gear up so quickly when COVID happened? I said, because we've been stockpiling for something we know comes every year, fire and earthquakes. So we always have a stockpile. We're always on the ready. Not every state can claim that. You know, maybe in another state, Florida, it's tornadoes. They gear up for that. But we've depleted those resources. The government has depleted those resources. Now, for the last 6 months, Governor Newsom has been asking each one to share with another person, share food with your neighbor, share a meal with your neighbor, share time with your neighbor, because the government is running dry.
And you know they're not. So we are a lucrative country with many assets, and we are nowhere near broke as a country. This says that our federal government is not supporting the states. And I ask, where is that money going? We could have a whole nother conversation. If the whole State Department is gone, why aren't we using the wages for those people? you know, I mean, he's closed down many departments
Mm-hmm.
within the government, and those wages were there based on budgets. So that money is there. If they did not use the money, we can use that. There's money everywhere. I feel, and some people started saying it, but I'm like they're saying, let them eat cake. I'm looking at the French Revolution. You know, I mean, everybody, you literally, those are the peasants. I mean, you know, just putting parallels. We are the peasants, and they are up there with all the money. We know that we're not broke as a country, and they are literally letting us suffer through this without their support.
What the government has to do is what you do for your household. We just can't spend every penny in the present and have none for the future. And you're right. That's why property tax guys said, we just can't let them go. They got to pay their property taxes. When you go get gas, there's tax on that. You still get taxed 8.75% when you go to the supermarket for those various goods. There are just some things you can't let go because there's going to be another rainy day. How long are we going to be in COVID? Your points are well taken, but this is such an unknown that we could be talking about this next September, because you don't have a time frame on this. And also, please keep in mind that Governor Newsom quickly took 10% or 5% out of everybody's salary who works for the state. He cut his in half, and people in his department. And those little drops in the bucket help fill the ocean. The federal government is not gone broke. They just want to spend money where they want to. You know, we're living in a Republican administration, and they think differently than Democrats. So you are right. And all the states that got money, like California, and New York, we're spending them on a lot of essentials to keep the hospitals going, respirators, those perishables, those masks, those N95 masks, those gloves. Sure, they're just trying to be efficient and think for the future, because we don't have an end date on this. Vaccine is another where this money's going, towards a vaccine. It's hard. It's hard because you bring up another thing. There's not full transparency. Whatever news we get in hindsight. We get in hindsight.
And
so
we can't trust it.
No, not fully, because sometimes there's not full disclosure. It's like a parent. I need to tell you in small doses because you're not, you know, Jack Nicholson, you can't handle the truth because it's too much to swallow in one gulp. So we just have to be flexible, open-minded, and do a lot of fact-finding on our own. This is more than a notion. Nobody knows what they're doing. From the least to the greatest, nobody knows.
That's right.
So let's boil this down literally to neighbors in a community. I mean, we're looking across socially distanced. And I mean, there is a sense of trauma that is just descending upon particularly the people of Southern California. What do we communicate to encourage the future? What do we have to hold on to that we will get better?
I go back to some of the other broadcasts we've done. Faith and flexibility, and just know that this too shall pass. But from a health standpoint, Shor, what are you thinking?
I mean, we adapt. I mean, we're a human. I think we're like roaches. I think we'll be here a while. You know, it's going to be harder than this to get rid of all of us. You know, there's some of us going to still be here to repopulate this magnificent earth. So, but we're in a very challenging time. Yes. We need to look at each other for help and support, just like Governor Newsom said, not just, you know, for the handout, but for conversation like this, mm-hmm. for us to do a sanity check, because we are all in little silos now. You know, we're only getting the information that we're pushing out. Facebook will only tell you what you want to know. They only push what they think you want to see. You know, you turn on TV, you watch what you choose. We are in bubbles. So I would say right now to come out of that bubble, to look for your neighbors, to look for support from others. And again, as I said, don't be so touchy, breathe and understand that we're all going through this together.
Yeah, I agree.
I think that is a very strong place for us to wrap up this really tricky environment. But the sense of community that is part of the American experience still remains. That connectivity, that sharing, that talking. So I think that brings us to a good closing point as we look at what TIPS IE does, Trauma Informed Prevention Services of the Inland Empire. We have to find a way, and it's not pie in the sky, but it's going to be a communal effort.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, I want to thank Shor Denny. I want to thank Joyce Clarke for bringing a huge amount of information and dysfunction really to a place where we can at least move forward with the expectation that, yes, let's persevere, let's continue, and let's make the Inland Empire a great place to live. It has the tools to do that. And if you have thoughts regarding that or any of the other comments, well, we are available. Joyce, be so kind as to tell them how to reach us.
Thank you. If you'd like to call us, it's 951-282-7173. Excuse me, 7173, 951-282-7173. For email, tips.inlandempirecal@gmail.com, tips.inlandempirecal@gmail.com. Thank you.
On behalf of Joyce Clarke, Shor Denny, and of course yours truly, Glenn W. Hunter, we encourage each and every one of you as you're interacting out there, be safe.
Yes.
Thank you.